Hi, everybody, and welcome to Matrix Live, somewhere between Season 2 and Season 3, where we seem to be on some kind of slightly unplanned hiatus, mainly due to things being incredibly busy as we rush around trying to land all of the stuff that we've been promising for months now, whether that's work on the spec, or speeding up Synapse, or new state res, or Riot redesign, and everything like that. Um, I don't know where to start really. I think the idea is we'll start Matrix Live again, probably in a slightly different format come season 3. But just giving a quick update based on the This Week in Matrix stuff. And apologies, this has run late. We were working until the middle of the night both last night and the night before, so this is coming to you on a slightly knackered Saturday morning. Where to start? Synapse side of things. Probably the biggest news is that Python 3 support has merged to develop. If you are an intrepid experimenter, we would strongly recommend that if you're running a monolithic Synapse, so no workers, try switching to a Python 3 VM. It only supports 3.5 and 3.6 because Twisted doesn't do 3.7 yet. But as the result of a massive amount of work from Hawkow and originally Notifile, this has all finally landed. I've been running it on my personal server for the last week or so and haven't had any disasters, but it's one of these things where we really need to soak test it and dog food it until it's working as well as we possibly can, hope, and check the logs for errors. It seems to improve RAM usage by about 50%, and it makes latency a lot better, possibly because of the better garbage collection support you get in Python 3. Should also mention that on Python 2, try running Synapse in JEmalloc, which is the BSD derived malloc implementation that turns out to do a much better job on Linux than the default libc malloc. And we've been running that on the matrix.org synapses for a couple of weeks now, and it has improved the memory usage massively. And basically, the fragmentation support for withstanding fragmentation seems to be much better, so that if Synapse has to allocate a bunch of RAM to do an old-style inefficient state resolution, it actually releases it back to the OS afterwards, rather than hanging on to it forever and making it look like your Synapse takes up gigabytes of RAM. What else? Also on Synapse, it's basically been a very operations-heavy week after the massive sprint to get R0 of the spec out at the end of August. We've had to play catch-up slightly on keeping matrix.org alive. For instance, we're about to run out of disk space there, and so Eric has gone and proofed out a new strategy for storing state groups in Synapse. And the way that works is that originally we captured a snapshot of the entire state of a room every single time a state event changed, so that you could rapidly pull out of the database what the state is as of a given point in time. This was horrifically inefficient. If you imagine something like Matrix HQ, which at points has had 20,000 users or whatever, if every single time anybody joins or leaves, you store a new snapshot of those 20,000 users, it's comically inefficient. So back in the day, we implemented delta encoding for these, and the way it works today is that you take a snapshot and then you have up to 100 deltas afterwards and then another snapshot. So that obviously improved the efficiency by roughly a factor of 100. However, even that is still horribly inefficient. And so what Eric's been experimenting with is taking that to the next level, where you do deltas between the snapshots as well as deltas on top of the snapshots. So you start off with a base one, you have a lot of little deltas on top, and then you have where you would have previously had a full new snapshot. Instead, you have a delta that points back to the original snapshot. So basically, you have a long series of deltas happening, as well as a short series of deltas in between, and you could even go the whole hog and have many layers of deltas on top of that until you really start to get something that's quite efficient. It's not as efficient as how Dendrite will do it, or does it, but it certainly gives you about a factor of 10 improvement over what we have today. So for those who've been suffering from lots of disk space used to the state groups table, that will be fixed very shortly. What other operational fun have we had? Federation keeps breaking over the last few days, outbound on matrix.org. This is due to a new dependency on develop called track, interacting badly with Twisted. We finally fixed it yesterday at about 8 p.m. Sorry that it took so long to get that stabilized, but things are now back to where they were. We didn't want to revert it because it would have meant rolling back most of the Python 3 stuff that has landed recently. What else? On Riot, huge amounts of work on all three platforms for lazy loading. It turns out that lazy loading exposes all sorts of interesting fragility, particularly on Riot Web, and so we keep chasing down edge cases where things have gone wrong, particularly on things like showing read receipts, disambiguating usernames, various different interactions of scrollback. We've also been finding new bugs which have been there since day one on Riot Web in terms of maintaining membership information. The good news is that we're building end-to-end tests using the new end-to-end test jig there, which uses Puppeteer to go and spin up genuine headless chromes and have them send messages around. And we've been implementing tests which then fail, which is great news, as we can then properly, robustly fix the problem underneath. This just keeps dragging on, though. We're about 3 weeks behind where we wanted to be on launching the lazy loading stuff, but the end is in sight. And good news also is that it reduces your RAM of your Riot by a factor of about 5. It speeds up sync by about 5, and other than these final glitches, it's just a massive, massive improvement. We've also been collating together bugs for what we call a first impressions project on Riot to try to fix some of the horrible bugs we still have that bite people in the first 24 hours of use. And so the metric is if it's a genuine bug rather than a kind of misdesign, and it would almost certainly hit people within 24 hours of use, it's now on this sort of special prioritized hit list, which we're going to be blitzing through over the next couple of weeks. Also, lots of progress on end-to-end improvements, getting the Megon backup stuff finally live, and this is a sorry tale of a project that I started back in January, didn't have time to finish myself, then has been handed over to Uhareg, who's been doing the crypto side, and Dave, who's more recently been doing the Riot side, and it's all finally being plugged together, and will hopefully improve make it almost impossible to lose your Megon keys because they will be encrypted and backed up on the server, but also paves the way for better verification and all of the end-to-end improvements that we've been promising for years. What else? Android has also been tuning sync performance as well as doing lazy loading, and I think they've improved the initial sync time massively by just having smarter filters and smarter limits on the different types of sync. So watch the space for progress there. And I guess the final obvious thing to talk about is that a subset of New Vector, the company who hires the Matrix and core team these days, have been beavering away for months now building out a product called Modular, which you might recognize as the integration manager for Riot. And the idea of Modular is to provide hosted services for Matrix full stop in order to bring money in, which can then let us hire the Matrix core team and keep the project afloat in the long term. Because it's all very well having the investment of cash that Status provided back in January, but we've been burning through that over the last 8 months, 9 months I guess now, and it's obviously critical that we get some sustainable cash in to keep supporting the team going forwards, and Modular is one of our first main steps towards doing that. Now, Modular, as it stands now, is soft launch as a hosted Matrix home server offering. And what we've done is to take the work that we've done for Status and TadHack and a couple of other folks who wanted us to host home servers for them and made it a completely one-click, sign yourself up server hosting solution. We haven't properly launched it yet. It's, as of last night, it's finally open to the public, but it's very much a soft launch to gather feedback and check to see what the pricing model is and how it works and the level of interest and all that sort of thing. And also to gather feedback in general and find any last bugs check that all of the payment stuff works in the wild with people in different countries and all that sort of thing. It's pretty cool, honestly. In behind the scenes, you get a dedicated Synapse running on a dedicated VM with a dedicated riot, so it's a completely compartmentalized, isolated home server specifically for your own purposes. The bad news is that at this point, Synapse doesn't scale down small enough for it to support individual users or kind of personal small deployments. So we're really targeting this at deployments where people have at least 50 active users who they want to have a dedicated server for, rather than using a potentially unreliable public server like matrix.org, or have all the fun and games of adminning their own Synapse or whatever home server. So let me think. It's unrecognizably snappy. I've been playing with one called sandbox.modular.im over the course of the week, and if people want to try before they buy, then feel free to ask for an account on Sandbox, so you can see just how fast and snappy it is. Even once you've joined a couple of big public rooms, it's just unbelievable how nice it is having a really, really tuned fast server for one's own purposes. And what else can I say about Modular? A couple of other interesting things is that read-only users are completely free, federated users are completely free, and users who only hang around for a couple of days don't count towards any of the costs of the platform. So if you were running, I don't know, an open source community or something, and you've got lots of support people who just come by, ask a question, and you never see them again, they just don't count towards the costs of running the service at all, so we don't charge for them. Basically, have a look at it if you're fed up with trying to run your own Synapse, or if you've been having a horrible time trying to use the matrix.org server for running a public community, and you've got a little bit of cash to spare, then we would recommend going over to modular.im and giving it a whirl and seeing how it goes. Once we've got any teething issues ironed out, we'll be yelling about it properly with the new Vector hat on. But it kind of makes sense to mention it here in This Week in Matrix for, I think this is the first paid software as a service Matrix hosting out there. So, fun times. What else? I guess I should apologise again for the hiatus in Matrix Live, and recommend that you go and read This Week in Matrix if you haven't already, where there's lots of fun updates from the wider community. Sea Glass is continuing at a pace. There's a good analysis of Fluffy Chat, one of the two Ubuntu ports, or sorry, UB ports clients out there. Also, Construct looks as if it's growing well, with support from Mujex and Talir and others running their own deployments now. So if you want to live on the very, very bleeding edge of C++ deployment home server base there, go check that out. And I think that's probably all I have to say this week. Hopefully some level of normality will be returned shortly once we have got some of the other things out the door. And I should have said that there's also on the Synapse side been a lot of work implementing the new state resolution and getting it efficient. You might recall that we had it implemented as a kind of proof of concept algorithm before. Now it's a lot more efficient, and we shall be yelling loudly about that once it lands in Synapse. And we have the room versioning in place in order to push it out to places, work of which will be happening next week. I'm not sure when it will actually land because there are a lot of unknowns. And that's basically the back-end team's top priority. Okay, there you have it. Welcome to my energy levels on a Saturday morning, and speak to you soon. Thanks for supporting Matrix. Bye.